Today on the podcast, we're talking about marriage with the Joel Lopez, who is a father of five. He is
Allegedly.
allegedly, because he doesn't post any family pictures on the internet. He helps men in their marriage, which is something that I'm really passionate about. My wife and I are really passionate about, and it is a very big topic, a very timely topic. And we're going to talk all about marriage and the work that you do, and how you help men. And hopefully, listening to this podcast, people will come away with actionable advice. And if they want more, they can reach out to you. So, Joel, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, man. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this. I actually meant to schedule this last week because I was like, oh yeah, I want to talk to Mike. But here we are. So let's do this, brother.
Well, cool, man. So we're very similar, like kids are similar ages and stuff. So similar, stage of life, which is, I think, one of the things that I'm going to go off on a little rant here, because we went to this marriage class thing that we volunteered to kind of lead at our church. And there's a couple that's been married for like 50 years. And they were like talking in front of the class, and it was just, or this group. And it was just interesting because you had a whole cohort of people that were like in our stage of marriage, or maybe even a little bit earlier. And it's like, they're not in the trenches. This couple that's like, they've been married for like 50 years, retired, all this stuff. So I love all the stuff you put out, because you are in the trenches actually living this stuff out. So it's not like in business, they call it like survivor bias, like the guy that has the big exit and like, he's made it and he's like, oh, here's my daily routine that's, optimized to the nth degree. It's like, well, you're not even running a business or doing anything, dude. Like, cool. That's awesome. You do a cold plunge and you have like a 3-hour morning routine. So I love your stuff, but I wanted to ask you, I want to start out with what does most marriage counseling or advice or programs get wrong?
Well, I think a lot of it. Well, I'll tell you, like I actually went to some counseling for for it, and the big thing for me was like, this guy's not like me. Like it
Mm,
was biblically. I'm a faith guy, okay? So I went to like a faith based, and everything he said was right, okay? But I just couldn't take it from him because he wasn't like me, and so that made like all the difference. It was just like, yeah, he's right, and but he's not like a guy like I
like you
grew
didn't
up.
respect him, or what do you mean?
Um, I wouldn't want to put it that way because I mean I had a respect for, but it wasn't like he had a. I didn't give him the authority, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a I grew up playing a lot of sports, and so I always like gravitated towards football coach because they had like authority. His guy knows what he's talking about, and he's kind of a dog, so I'm gonna listen to him. Like that was kind of it. So for him, it was just like this very super soft approach. It wasn't very um like it's like, yeah, what you're saying is really right. It was like kind of like this, that kind of happy wife, happy life kind
Mm.
of very very nice. And it was just like, well, I don't know. So I just had a hard time accepting it. Okay. And then then finally it's like, I went to my pastor and he's like, dude, you're messing up. Like you need to like stop with this and you need to fix your crap, basically. And it was like, oh, okay. Like I needed like somebody to talk to me like my dad would have talked to me, like set you down, like, dude, slap you around, blah, 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 blah. Stop being
Mm-hmm.
stupid. Like that's kind of what I needed. It wasn't so much the information, it was just about like who was delivering it. It's like, oh, okay, this guy knows, or this
Yeah.
guy's not like a pushover, so he's not like, you know, there was probably like a lot of factors. Like I was resistant to it. Like it was things that I had to kind of accept and change, and it was like I didn't want to, like
Yeah.
most things. So I think that is just like the with like counseling therapy for men. It's just like, yeah, like you're telling me this, and maybe it is right, but like you're kind of soft, I guess. Is like a hard thing for
Yeah.
guys, and not that I'm like, again, like super tough guy. Like I've never been in a real fight or anything, but it
Yeah.
was just like, just the energy of a person. It's like, oh, like this guy is like kind of got like fire in his belly. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the way to put it. He's got a fire in his belly. So my pastor had fire in his belly, so it was like, okay, like he could talk to me that way. This
Yeah.
other guy was just like, I don't know. There's no fire there. So there was a part of me that kind of respected the fire in the belly, as
Yeah.
opposed to who it's coming from.
Do you think that's a common thing in marriage counseling or
Some of the things
circles
that
or
I've
curriculum?
heard, one guy that was helping was like, yeah, the counselor that they set me up with wasn't married, didn't have kids. He was 6 years old, hippie, and he was like giving me like you know, stress management techniques. And it's like that was not helpful. Like you can't sleep when you have like newborn. Like you know how that is. And there was another guy that I helped, and it was like, yeah, what we did in 3 months of 3 months of coaching, you know, we got farther than 2 years of counseling, because like my goal is like I don't want you to stay with me. Like I want you to
Yeah.
get the tools, own it, and go. Like I don't want you to be with me like ongoing. Like no, I actually like so my program is 12 weeks. I actually wanted it to be 4 weeks because I was like, yo, like here's your stuff, get it and go. Like I'm not trying to like
Make you
have you for
dependent kind of
years and
thing.
years, and now because I think that puts me in a bad position. Now it's like now I'm kind of codependent on you because now I'm relying on you for income. It's like no, get what you need, own it, and go. And now
Yeah.
you're the one responsible. And that I think is maybe the fundamental difference. Is like I don't take people who are like my wife is the one that needs to change. Like nope, not we're not working then,
Hmm.
because you have to own and be responsible for yourself. And I think you know counseling, therapy, like I'm sure it's helpful and stuff, but it's like if you don't start from that position of it's on me, then I don't, I think that's really like a fundamental difference. And maybe that's that whole fire in your belly thing too. It's like you can't change anything that you have no control or authority over, and you have to start with you first. You have
Yeah.
no control or authority over what your wife does or how she reacts. All you can do is control how you react. That's it.
Yeah. 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 I remember I like the teaching of Mark Driscoll, a pastor, and he had
Mm-hmm.
this sermon about he was talking to it was like it was a series for men, and he went on this rant. He's like, "You got to freaking figure it out." He said that probably 10 times in this rant. He's like, you know, you're out of shape. You got to freaking figure it out. Like your
Mm-hmm.
wife is stressed or what that you got to freaking figure it out. And it was like it was all that he went on this whole rant about. You just have to figure it out, and you got to put on your big boy pants. And
Mm-hmm.
just like you were saying with the fire in the belly, it was like it
Mm-hmm.
just resonated really strongly with me because it was so there was no buts. There was no you got to figure out. But if this is your scenario, there was no outs of the whole thing, and it was refreshing because I strongly believe, like you were saying, it starts with your own personal responsibility.
I'll say that with
Um,
a caveat though, because I did coach high school football. Okay,
yeah,
and part of so I agree with the attitude.
yeah,
Also, I don't want to be butt guy, but there's also like some coaches will be like, just play harder, and it's well, yeah, to an extent, but sometimes like there is teaching that's involved. So,
mm-hmm,
so my podcast was originally it is read your keys, and it's for this reason. So I played football. I worked hard. It meant a lot to me. I wanted to be really good. I was on the scout team, going up to varsity. And so the scout team is like you're the one that basically gives the look to the varsity players. So I'm the guy that's like this guy's just he's just a guy. He's not one of these players. But one of the coaches took an interest in me because he saw like how hard I was playing. And again, I've been playing for years too, so it wasn't like like I had been playing since I was a kid, so it wasn't like I hadn't seen football, like I was new to it. But basically, for me, it was like see ball, chase ball, go get ball. Like that was like my philosophy. So
yeah,
expended a lot of energy. So anyway, he talks to me, and so I'm playing out a spot. And he's like, "Look, I want you to watch this guy right here, just this guy. Don't follow the ball. Watch this guy right here, and wherever he goes, you go." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then so I watch him. So now the game, because football is like it's like this. It's like 11 players. Stuff is crazy. There's a lot of like noise, but then it kind of just like singularly focused. Now it's like, oh, I'm just looking at this one person. So now, like instead of having to take on like thousands of pieces of information, now it's just like one or two pieces of information that I'm having to kind of process and fast, right? So I did what he says. I follow him where he goes, and all of a sudden, like there's the ball. It's right there. Like I'm right there to. I was like, oh, that's pretty nice. And then like And like, but it didn't make sense to me either. I was like, well, if he goes over here doing to do this, I'm gonna follow him. It's like, yeah, do that. And I did that, and it's like, oh, like there it is right there. So some of it is, yes, go harder. Like if I want to tackle somebody, the first thing you have to do is like want to tackle. Like there's no technique for that. It's like you got to want to get in there and like hit somebody. Like
Yeah.
that's true. But then after that, there is a technique involved, and I think that's kind of what I. That's where like I always say like, hey, I want somebody who's going to own it first, because that's kind of like the, hey, you got to want to do it, and then from there is, okay, now we can work on technique because you actually do want to fix this, and it can be fixed, but you just don't know what you're doing. You're expending a lot of energy that you don't really have to.
Yeah. So the step one is wanting it, taking responsibility. Second,
Yeah, that's always it, man. I think that's like the first and foremost, and I think that's where I struggled and have struggled, because again, it's like it's not like you don't ever arrive. You
mm-hmm.
don't ever arrive. Like it's a daily choice to like own it. And there's some days I own it for sure, and there's other days I'm like, nope, I'm gonna, I'm not, I'm not. And
Yeah.
those days are harder. But I mean, just like anything, like some days, like I don't feel like being a dad today, but here we are. And maybe on those days I'm a better dad or a worse dad. But it's always an ongoing choice. It's just like faith, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
always a believer for sure, but some days it's like, you want me to pray for this person out here? I don't know about this one today, God.
Yeah.
Not today. Not
About this
today.
one.
Some days it's like, yes, Lord, send me. And other days
Yeah.
it's like, nope, I'm
Nope.
I'm Jonah. I'm Jonah. I'm going the other way.
I have to get thrown out of a boat to change my direction, right?
Yeah, yeah. I get a spit out of a fish.
Yes,
You know what I
out of a
mean?
fish.
Like,
That's right.
there you go. Yeah. So some days I'm like, here I am, Lord, send me. Another day, like, not today.
And I found with that one of the biggest things is you can't let the bad days carry into the rest of the days.
Mm,
Whether it's how you behave and doing very detrimental things to the relationship with your wife or your kids, but also in your identity. I found the
mm-hmm,
worst, the lowest I've ever gotten in that is like you have a couple bad days, you're tired, you're exhausted, stressed out with work or whatever, and Satan starts to attack your identity, right? Like, oh, you're not even
mm-hmm,
that good of a dad, or like, yeah,
mm-hmm.
things aren't going well because you
Yeah,
did all
yeah.
these things. And it's you really, this is a pattern. Like you really messed up all these other places, and it's like you have to take a step back and say, okay, are these legitimate things I need to change? Yes, some of
Mm-hmm,
them, but these are not my identity. These are some mistakes I've made, but I'm not going to sit here and let get dragged further down this path. I'm going to say, no, this is where I can, these are not truths. And here's the action I can take, that I need to take for the next day or right then or whatever. And I think that's been a huge thing for me in, I would say, like practical things to avoid, because what that does is one day creates a bad week,
mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
a string of days, and then that's not good, so you got to cut that off.
I love that you bring up identity, because I always say that when Jesus goes into the wilderness and is tested by Satan, the first thing he attacks him with or by is his identity. He says,
Mm-hmm.
is it true that you're the Son of God? Well, it is true that he's the Son of God, but that's how Satan attacked Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Is it true that that identity is, I think, everything. And yeah, on those days where it's like, man, I kind of like lost my cool with the kids, or you know didn't put my best foot forward as a husband. And it's just like, that's a big one for me too, because if I have a rough patch, like say, me and my wife have an argument, and all of a sudden it's like, well, you're really the guy that's going to be telling other people
Yeah.
how to be a husband. And so that's something that I actually kind of will deal with. It's like, oh man, like, because the last thing anybody wants to be is a hypocrite and be like, oh, like, your stuff's not even, you're here, you are having fights with her. But that's what it goes back. It's like, marriage is not a game of perfect. It's a game of
Yeah.
resiliency. So yes, you're going to have bad days. They're not all going to be, great vacations, freaky hotel sex. It's, kids throwing up. It's losing your temper, but coming back and like, hey, and apologizing. Like that's really what it is. And just the giving the day the best that you have to give for that day. And that's
Mm-hmm.
it. What is it? Something about tomorrow has enough of its, or today has enough of its stresses for the
Yeah.
day. Don't worry about tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing again. I'm not a
Has enough
clergy guy
trouble of
either.
its
I'm
own, right? Like
right.
that's each day has
I always
its
tell people, it's
troubles.
like, dude, I'm not a clergyman. I'm just a dude that loves Jesus. All right, like that's
Don't let that be a crutch either, though, Joel.
that's true. That's true. That's true.
You know more than
I,
you let on, man.
I got my Bible around here somewhere. I think my
That's
kids are
right.
playing with it now. They lost it.
So moving on with identity, not identity, but talking about taking personal responsibility for wanting to improve your marriage. Maybe your marriage isn't on the brink of divorce, but maybe you're just saying, "Hey, I want a deeper marriage." Speaking to the men primarily, right? So they wanna step up. They're owning it. What is the next step? Talk about read your keys, and this is something you talk about a lot that I love on Twitter, where you say, hey, is your wife, organized? This is
Mm-hmm.
how to, speak to her. And I think there's a trap that we get in, is that we think our wives are like us, or going to behave like us, or going to respond like us. And I know I get sucked into that. And I love that framing that you do, because it's like the old adage of communication isn't what you say, it's what the person hears.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you speak to that, and how you've helped, like, it's just how your clients have kind of managed that, and how you've helped them kind of read their spouse's keys?
That's the really a massive difference, because that's what really happened in my marriage. Was I had this certain way of processing information, and I was like, well, of course, this is everybody does that. And when you say it out loud, you're just like no, like who believes that? But like we get into it, and it's just that's how we behave though. Like it in our heads, but the big argument for a lot of married couples is sex. Like one's doesn't get enough, one's too much, or whatever. It's just like, well, like can't you see it? It's like, well, no, because we're different. So like we know that. And so one of the exercises that I always do with my clients is we fill out a profile, and it kind of shows them, like, hey, you think first, then you take action, then you think, then you take action, and then you feel way down at the bottom.
Mm.
Like 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 there's what's that show? The Price is Right. There's this kind of a game Plinko, and this thing would kind of like filter down until it got to the bottom. So that's like when you get this piece of information or stimulus, like you think about it, then you take action, but then your feelings come way later, which is
Hmm.
good, because for a lot of men that's helpful, because it's like, hey, you're in business, so that serves you in business, because you don't want your feelings running you in business. You want to be thinking and then taking action. So that serves you there. Or you're a high level athlete. Like, yo, you don't want to worry about your feelings. You got to get in there and do what you need to do. So men can do that, and it works for them in there. But now when they get into a relationship, though, another person they have to deal with, it's like, well, what do you think your wife is? Yeah, she's feelings first, and then thinking, and then action. Depending, it's any number of combinations, but that's kind of what it comes down to. It's like your action and thinking first, and your feelings happen way later, and she's feelings first, and then her either thinking or action comes way later. So what we have here is a beautiful thing, because she covers you, because she's very intuitive, she understands feelings, and you don't, so she strengthens you that way. And your action and or thinking and hers comes lower, and you cover her that way. Beautiful. But when you guys come together, you guys are coming at looking at it from a different perspective, and what could be something that's complementary becomes conflict.
Hmm.
So if you don't take a step back, what should be something that you guys come together as a strength becomes a source of conflict. And that's what happened in my marriage. It happens, I'll say, like 90% of the times with the clients that I work with. It's like, yo, like, you guys have the same goals, you're just coming about it from different angles. She's feelings, and you don't understand feelings, and you're thinking, and she doesn't understand that till later. Again, so it's not like she doesn't, but it's just it comes way later in the process. So this is where your breakdowns are happening. So when you are tired, when you're not sleeping because the baby's up, or you've been working 80 hours, like, your cup is empty, and now for you to be able to meet her in her feelings takes even more effort. So here's where the conflict happens, and that's a lot of what happens too. It's like, hey, like, we're just both super busy, and so now we're getting snappy, whereas before we would have extended
Hmm.
grace. which again is another component of the training. It's like, yo, you got to extend grace. It's like, if you want this scene to work, she extends you grace because your feelings come way later, and you have to extend her grace because her either action or thinking comes way later. So you married her. And again, that goes back to responsibility. Like I always ask the question is like, hey, who asked who out? And they'll be like, I did. Like, who asked who to marry who? I did. So you're there because of you, all right, buddy? So let's
You started this
let's
thing.
make
Let's
let's
finish it.
yeah, yeah. You
Let's keep
you
it going.
this whole thing, you instigated this whole thing. And I always throw out, unless like you're a male feminist or something like that. So it's like, so you don't have to worry about it because she asked you to marry her.
In that case, you got to find a new coach, right?
Yeah, I'm not your guy
We're
anyway,
not on the
man.
same page here.
Yeah, yeah, we're playing different ball games here.
Yeah, sorry, literally. Oh man, that's great. So, like, tell me a little bit about, um, the process. I like the adage of like, if all it took was information, we'd all be super fit and super wealthy.
Hmm.
Um, what are some of the hangups or some of the aha moments that your clients have? So all that you're saying to me intuitively, makes
Hmm.
sense. It's
Hmm.
not rocket surgery, as they say, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
um, and I think some of it, it's like timing, it's a reminder, it's it's the way that it's said, and giving examples and that sort of thing that is really powerful. But can you speak to maybe other ways that your clients have seen like aha moments, meaning like what were the blockers to them
Yeah, that's a good
internalizing what you're
question.
saying?
I think people kind of have an understanding of who they are until it, but then like what I do is almost like put the mirror up, and it's just like, oh yeah, that is right, and that is why I do that. That is true. Okay, and because of this, what am I doing? So that's kind of part of it. And then the other aha is because it's like, well, if this is true for me, is this framework true for her? Does it apply? It's like, oh yeah, it does. Okay, great. So I had a client, very successful in business, very fit, was able to take care of himself, but came home and it was like a mess at home. And it was like, hey, why is it a mess at home? It's like, well, how do you talk to her? It's like, well, I'm kind of like resentful and talk down about her, all these things. Okay. So it's like, well, let's, talk about your childhood. And it was like, well, weakness was frowned upon in my household. So being vulnerable or being compassionate was like a sign of weakness. So guess what he lacked in his marriage? Compassion. Like
Mm,
he was low in compassion for his wife. So for him, also didn't want to be a hypocrite. So it was like, hey, why don't you buy her some flowers? Like, did you ever buy her flowers? And it was like, well, I didn't have the feeling of like wanting to get her flowers, so I didn't want to buy her flowers because then I would be a hypocrite because I was just kind of doing it even though I didn't feel like it. So I asked him, I was like, have you ever worked out when you didn't feel like it? He's like, oh yeah. Did that make you a hypocrite? Well, no. It's like, well, let's apply it that same way. Like, you don't feel like buying her flowers because you don't feel lovey dovey, so you feel like it makes you, you know, a liar or a hypocrite to yourself. So just do it anyway. And then as you do the thing, then the feelings follow. Like like that happens, right? Like when you start working out,
yeah.
you didn't feel like it at first, but once you start working out, you're like, oh yeah, I feel good. And now it's like, oh, I'm gonna do an extra set or like an extra couple of reps because now I'm like, yeah, man, I'm into it. But going back down to the compassion thing was, he felt like that was weakness. So that had to be addressed. It's like, well, you think that being compassionate makes you weak? Like, why? So once we addressed the compassion issue, this and then it was like he could own it, and that was, and now it was because not because so much for his wife. It's always whatever character trait we work on. It's for you as the man, not for anybody else. Just because this is just the kind of man I want to be. I
Hmm.
want to be a compassionate man. And because of that, now I have that identity of being compassionate. Now my actions are that of a compassionate man, not because of the things I do. It's because it is who I am. Like if I want to be generous, I take on the characteristics of it's like I'm a generous man, and
Yeah.
because I'm a generous man, this is what I do. But we have it the opposite. It's like, oh, I do this thing. It's like no, like it's who you are first.
Yeah.
And I think that's what like a lot of I think just like in dating and stuff too. It's like women don't want a man who doesn't have money. It's like no, they want a man with character, and your character speaks about who you are. If you don't show it or not, people can tell.
Yeah. I have two
Those,
follow up questions on that. I think
yeah.
well, I think the notion of acting who you are or claiming that like is important. So I immediately thought of, there's this notion of kind of being a professional. Like you talk about like if you want to be like a writer or if you want to be like an athlete or you want to be like say like someone that's like getting into bodybuilding or something's like I or like in my case when I started doing more like endurance type sports, it was like triathlon stuff. It was like I didn't like running before, like just a few years ago. Like I hated it, and it was like this huge mental hurdle to get over. And I've actually kind of fallen in love with it a little bit. But it was like I had to
Mm-hmm.
get to a point where it's like I'm not someone who hates running. I'm a runner, and this is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go buy
Yeah.
the running stuff, and I'm going to embrace the fact that I am that. Okay, I'm not a professional runner. I'm not going to break any records, but it's a mind shift of yeah, this is what I do, and in the same way of when we talk about the compassion thing, but in my role as a husband and a father, it's like I want to be a world class father. I want to be a world class
Mm-hmm.
husband. That's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna embrace that. Yeah, I'm not that every day, but I think that going back to the identity thing, one thing that's been powerful for me is like auditing your self talk to say when do you feel like you're enforcing negative self beliefs based on bad circumstances. Something goes south, and you're like, oh no,
Mm-hmm.
that's just okay. That's my bad. I lost my cool. Like, yeah, I'm impatient. I'm an impatient person. It's like, no, that's not. So embracing that I think is huge. Um, and I think I lost my train of thought a little bit on the next point I was going to make, but I think the like buying the flowers thing is so like clutch. It's
Mm-hmm.
like action precedes feelings is like especially
Yeah.
for guys. I think it's like just do it, and it's
Yeah.
like you don't have to. I don't know if this is a common. I'm curious if this is with some of your clients, um, but it's like you don't want to. So sometimes my thought process may be like, well, I don't want to get flowers because I want it to be like maybe like I want it to be like a bigger thing than it is, um,
Mm.
and I want to be like, oh, make it kind of more an event. This isn't necessarily how I think about it all the time, but it's like you kind of can be like, well, I want to be this like special thing, or whatever. It's like I do a regular thing now where if I'm like out at a business lunch, I'll order a little extra of something I know my wife likes. I'll take it home to her in a little takeout container, and it just like makes her day because she's like,
Yeah.
you thought of me. Like it doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to be a special thing. It doesn't have to be that
Mm-hmm.
much. It could be the tiniest little thing, and she's like, oh my goodness, like you were out at something and you thought of me, and like and to whereas I could be the opposite, the other way I could take that would be like I have to get her drink the right drink she wants, and it has to be like all like a whole meal, and it has to be a special thing, maybe a little flowers to like make it this special gift, and it's like no, that doesn't matter at all. I don't know if that's a tangent, but um,
No, I
that's
mean
I
I
think an
do.
important thing.
I think that's a thing where I don't know if that's most guys have that. Like I have this ideal, and so I want to hit the ideal, but if I don't hit the ideal, then I don't do anything. So I was just telling you about like working out, right? Because like, oh, I haven't worked out because it's like, I need 45 minutes or whatever. It's like, well, I
Yeah,
haven't done it. So let me
yeah,
just go do some quick pull-ups and push-ups and, let me do that. And I think was a big aha, if anything for me. It's like, yeah, you don't need to like go flyer to New York and go to Broadway and stay at a five-star hotel. It's just like, you went to a business lunch and just got a little extra of the thing that I liked. That means the world to me because it's really like the day to day that makes all the difference.
yeah.
Like yeah, I wanted you to take you to the nice restaurant and steak but yeah, we got five kids. Like we have a hard time getting a sitter for 5 kids. So,
Yeah.
hey, I was at the store and I saw that you liked, you know, I picked up a drink for you or your favorite drink for you or some snacks or whatever. It's like, oh, you thought of me. And that was exactly uh, one of my clients had that same thing. It was like he just bought a bunch of her favorite snacks, and then every now and then he'll just be like, "Oh, here's I got you a snack," and she's just like blown away by it because it was just like there is this thing where you can get. I think one of the fundamental things for a marriage to last long term, again, is the man having to take ownership, but it's also gratitude. Like you just get used to her. Like,
Yeah.
for some men, it's like, yeah, this was the woman of my dreams. I'm in that camp. But some of the guys was like, yeah, we just kind of just stayed together, and so we just took the next step. It wasn't like I was excited about it. It's like, okay,
There's too many men
but
in that
now,
camp, I think, dude. It's like
yeah, yeah, it really,
it's like,
it
dude, come
really
on,
is.
man, get out of here. Like,
Yeah,
you should be
I
like,
mean,
oh my god, I'm married to her. Like, that should be a regular occurrence. Like, I think that's
well, the
my
thing is,
viewpoint.
will you have it if they did have it, it's early on, and then year
Then they should
five
have
or
they should have
six.
put a ring on
They,
it and should have just
Mhm.
started having babies right then. Like, it's like, come on, man.
Well, the thing is, it's just like anything. So like I'll go back to the sports analogy, right? I loved football, but there's just like after like year like 6 or 7, you're just like, man, I'm kind of over it.
Yeah.
Well, what happened? My senior year in high school, I tore my ACL, so I
Mm,
lost it, and it was like, oh, this is what it's like to not have it, and that's usually the problem that we have is like now the marriage is like so bad that now it's like, oh, like I've taken it for granted for so long,
yeah.
and now we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So that's actually where the wifeful sexual stuff came from, was like I want to have like this that mindset that I had when we were dating. Like I can't get enough of you. Well, because my wife and I, we were long distance, so it meant a lot to even like get a phone call from her because there was no FaceTime, there was no
Yeah.
cell phones. I had to get like 1 hour a week phone call and some letters for
Yeah.
months at a time before I saw her. So it was like always a big deal to be able to see her. But then now, you get to the point where it's like, well, we're together all the time, the kids, stress. It's like, oh, I could
Yeah.
take it for granted. It's like, no, like this is what you prayed for. This is what you wanted.
Yeah.
Remember that. And so I think gratitude is just one of those fundamental things, like owning it and then having that gratitude is like, hey, this is what you wanted. Remember that. Like this is what you had prayed for. And now you'd rather watch the game than, take out the trash like you were supposed to, or whatever's dumb thing. So I think people, it's not rocket science, rocket surgery, but it does take
Yeah.
effort. I think so. Like I was watching this show 1883, and it's just like they're on these trails, and like there's death all over the place. Like we're not dealing with that, but it is harder now because we live in a culture that doesn't respect marriage. Like porn gets thrown at you. You people telling you that marriage is for losers. Like so it's a different battle now. I think it's more of a spiritual
Yeah.
battle than actual like physical threats for us. And raising kids on top of it, like like you have to be very careful of what your kids are watching. So it's a different type of battle now that you have to be
Yeah.
like
Absolutely.
prepared for. So yeah, I'm going on a
No, it's
tangent
all
too.
right.
So
It's
sorry.
all
Go ahead.
good stuff. One thing I want to hit on before we wrap up, I know we're kind of going a little long here, but um, you mentioned, I don't want to get too hung up on this, but you mentioned that like when you're talking to people, you say, how was like the home you grew up in, or, how did your parents do it, in terms of like marriage and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I realized early in our marriage was my parents didn't really argue in front of us, like the kids, or maybe if they did, it was resolved somewhere else, right? So there was this
Mm-hmm.
like avoidance of conflict because when it did erupt, it was usually like the worst fights, right? So they'd like my parents didn't really get into
Mm-hmm.
big scream out matches, but it was like there to whereas in my wife's household, there was more of an open, maybe argument that happens, but then it's resolved in front of the kids, right? So they kind of see it play
Mm-hmm.
out, they see it come full circle. So my natural, like maybe I didn't even realize it, but my tendency would be like, can't have any conflict because, that's, I don't know how this gets resolved, and it's always usually bad, so I want to just avoid it, right? And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious. I know you can. There's a tendency to get too wrapped up in like, oh, this is from your childhood, all this stuff, like lingering too much on that. But I think it is important. I'm curious, how you do that with your clients and like how that plays a role. Just to have some realizations and some ahas, like, oh, this is a tendency, based on your upbringing, and this is how you kind of help with it.
No, that's a great question, and that's so one of the first things we do is before we even get into like any of like the curriculum per se, it's like, yo, where did you come from? Because
Yeah,
that all matters. I had a client who his his dad acquiesced to everything that his
yeah,
mom wanted. So his dad was kind of like, you know, not he was a good he was like, yeah, my dad was great, but my mom just always
yeah.
got her way. Well, what do you think happened in his
Same
marriage?
thing.
She always got her way. And again, this is not like there is a point where it's like you want your wife to be happy, but you as a man, sometimes you have to make decisions that's like, yo, this is for us in the family. This is
Hmm.
what needs to be done. Okay. So there was never there he had to have more authority in his marriage. And that was the thing that actually saved his marriage, was because it was like, yo, you need to step up because you're letting she's running all over you. This is a
Yeah,
pattern that you had. So you need to be more authoritative or stronger in your positions and be like, yo, like this is not okay, because he was accepting behaviors that
yeah,
shouldn't be accepted. Okay. Um, and then I had another client that was like, yeah, there was no affection in our home, and that was something that he was kind of afraid of that would happen in his because it was like something that he had seen. So it's like, okay, like let's work on that. But what people don't realize though is when the two people get married, it's two cultures that are kind
yeah.
of coming together. So maybe like in your instance, yeah, like yours is like, we don't talk about it, and this was like open, honest communications. Well, you might know that, but then when it's time to kind of um, have those conflicts still, even though you know it, like there's still that hesitancy because that's the culture that you
Hmm.
came up in. So you have to be aware of it and be like, okay, like no, I'm gonna push forward and not do this thing. That's why I think dating is so important though, because you have to realize like, hey, this is the culture that
Yeah,
she comes from. I'm taking that on, and now it's my responsibility as a man. I have to have seen where she came from, because that's what I'm going to be dealing
yeah.
with in the future. Am I okay with that? And she has to do the same
Right.
with you. Like, this is where you come from. Like, hey, you come from a family of drunks. Hey, be aware. Like, maybe he doesn't drink right now, but that's something that can kind of creep up
Yeah.
later on. You got to be aware of that. And I think going back to that arguing thing, like I had something. It wasn't a client, but I was talking to somebody who was older, and he told me that because his son just got married and they had this big fight, and he called his dad and he was worried, and he's like, "We just had this big fight. It's over." And his dad was like, "Whoa, what are you talking about?" He's like, his son said, "Like, I never saw you and mom fight," and he was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, we fought all the time, but we just fought
Yeah.
in the room, and we just." And so it was like kind of like you. Uh, for me, it's like my wife and I, we kind of fight anyway, because I don't know if it's just like you could say like I'm Mexican, Latino, fiery, or whatever. So like, oh, I'm mad, like um, so we kind of fight anyway. But like for us, it's like, the kids see it. I'm gonna say it. I'm kind of a yeller. All right, I'm a yeller. Uh, um, but like we always tell our kids, mommy and daddy are never leaving you. Mommy and daddy are always staying together. Mommy and daddy are gonna work it out. We fight. We love each other. We're gonna work it out, because they don't like to
Yeah.
see us having our arguments or whatever. But it's always mommy and daddy love each other. We're just having an argument. We're just upset with each other. It happens, just like you get upset with your siblings and you guys work it out. Mommy and daddy sometimes fight. So, um, yeah, I think that's just one of those things that we have to voice. It's just that, hey, nobody's leaving. We're just upset right now, and we're
Yeah.
we're working through it.
Yeah, that's huge. I think one of the things my dad always says, you marry the family. And what he meant by that, he still says I still laugh. But he is what you're saying, the culture, but then also like, yeah, what are the things that they value? They might not be exactly the same with
Mm-hmm.
your spouse, like, but they're going to be a lot the
Mm-hmm.
same, right? So it's not necessarily like, yeah, you're going to have to. It's not like a deal breaker per se. Like when he talked about that, he was like, just know what you're getting into. It's like, yeah, it's good
Right.
context.
Well, because
Right,
no
right.
family is perfect, right? Like no family is perfect. Like I have my shortcomings. My wife, when she was dating me, like that was one of the things she loved. She's like she loved the family that I came from. Like that was like a big draw. So like I see how you guys talk to each other. Whatever is different from her household. But so there was benefits to that. But also I have my own shortcomings where it's like, yo, I'm not very handy. Like stuff gets broken around the house, it's like, ugh, who are we gonna call? Like that's a culture I grew up like. That was our kind of like family culture. It's like we weren't a handy like
Mm-hmm.
projects kind of house. Like some houses are like yeah, that's no big deal, but then they don't really get along. Like that's not to say that you can't. I'm just using that as a
Yeah,
difference. Like this is not like a either or. I'm just using that as an example. So, and that's something that I'm looking to develop. That's also a culture of our family. Like yo, we're
yeah,
learners, we're always going to learn. So that's kind of a part of the culture of our family. Like when my kids wake up, I greet them, I kiss them, I tell them I love them every morning before they leave. Like they left today, every single one of them, touch them on the head. Daddy loves you. God bless you. When they come in, hey, how you doing? I kiss. We're very affectionate here. But then also, like my kids, like if somebody leaves, like yo, say bye to your brother,
yeah.
say bye to your sister when they come in, go say hi to your brother. So it's like there's always an acknowledgement of like somebody is leaving, say goodbye. Somebody is coming in, receive them. You know, that's just it's a small thing, but I think it just sets the tone and the atmosphere in our house, and that's kind of how my wife and I are though, because that's where it comes from. Like she leaves, I give her a kiss,
Yeah.
bye, love you, pat on the
It's
ass.
a
Ah,
cultural
can't get enough.
practice, right? I
It's
mean, it's
home,
like a cultural
right?
um ritual
Mm-hmm.
almost.
This is how we
Yeah.
this is how we do things
Yeah.
here. You take off your shoes in the house when you get here, and
Yeah.
you get a hug and a kiss.
Get that
Like
Lopez love,
that's 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 our house.
Yeah, baby.
Get some, baby.
I'm bring the whole crew down to Arizona. We'll share a meal together.
Yeah, that'd be
Experience it
awesome.
firsthand.
The weather's about to turn where it's just like the best place to be in. Like it's gonna be like I don't know what it is today. It's like 80 or something like that. Still
It's like
85,
40
but
degrees and cold here, so
Thanksgiving is
speaking my love language.
Thanksgiving. It's not uncommon for Thanksgiving to be wearing shorts and flip
Sounds
flops
good.
for Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Well, cool, Joel. So if someone's interested after listening to this and they got some value and they want to work with you, what's the next step, man?
They can just find me on Twitter's where I basically spend most of my time. You can interact with me there. I'm at the Joe Lopez, TheeJoelLopez. Um, there's a link there if they want to schedule a call and talk. Um, yeah, I mean, I have a newsletter there that I kind of put out there so they can sign up for that also. That's probably the best way. Though, just go on Twitter. If you like this,
Awesome. And
check
I'll
that
I'll
out.
link it up on the show
Go from
notes
there.
too. Like if someone's listening on a computer or something. So, Joel, thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate you. Yeah, baby, for the
Kingdom,
kingdom.
baby.
All right.
All right, man.